Why the hell didn't I put felt boots on? Hellish cold. Look, look, there's Petliura. That's not Petliura, that's the commander of the bodyguard. Petliura has a palace in Belaya Tsarkov. Belaya Tsarkov will be the capital now. Won't he come to the city, then? He'll come in his own good time. I see, I see. Clang, clank, clank. The muffled boom of kettledrums rolled across St. Sophia's Square, then down the street. Machine guns thrust menacingly from their gun ports, swaying slightly from the weight of their turrets, rolled the 4 terrible armored cars. But the enthusiastic, pink-cheeked Lieutenant Strashkevich was no longer inside the leading car. A disheveled and far from pink-cheeked Strashkevich, waxy gray and motionless, was lying in the Marinsky Park at Pechursk, immediately inside the park gates. There was a small hole in Strashkevich's forehead and another, plugged with clotted blood, behind his ear. The lieutenant's naked feet stuck out of the snow and his glassy eyes stared straight up into the sky through the bare branches of a maple tree. It was very quiet round about, there was not a living soul in the park and scarcely anyone was to be seen even on the street. The sound of music from St. Sophia's Square did not reach as far as here, so there was nothing to upset the complete calm on the lieutenant's face. Hooting and scattering the crowd, the armored cars rolled onward to where Bogdan Khmelnytsky sat and pointed northeastwards with a mace, black against the pale sky. The great bell was still sending thick, oily waves of sound over the snowbound hills and roofs of the city. In the thick of the parade the drums thumped untiringly and little boys, maddened with excitement, swarmed around the hooves of the black Bogdan. Next in the parade was a line of trucks, snow chains clanking on their wheels, carrying choirs and dancing groups in Ukrainian costume, brightly colored embroidered skirts under sheepskin tunics, plaited straw wreaths on the girls' heads and the boys in baggy blue trousers tucked into their boot tops. At that moment a volley of rifle fire came from Rylsky Street. Just before it there had been a sudden whirlwind of peasant women screaming in the crowd. There was a shriek and someone started running, then a staccato, breathless, rather hoarse voice shouted, "I know those men. Kill them." They're officers. I've seen them in uniform. A troop of the 10th Cavalry Regiment, waiting their turn to march into the square, forced their way into the crowd and seized a man. Women screamed. The man who had been seized, Captain Pleshko, cried out weakly and jerkily. I'm not an officer. Nothing of the sort. What are you doing? I'm a bank clerk. Beside him another man was arrested, white-faced and silent, who wriggled in the soldier's grip. Then the crowd scattered down the street, jostling each other like animals let out of a sack, running away in terror, leaving an empty space on the street that was completely white except for one black blob, someone's lost hat. A flash and a bang, and Captain Pleshko, who had thrice denied himself, paid for his curiosity to see the parade. He lay face upward by the fence of the presbytery of St. Sophia's Cathedral, spread-eagled, whilst the other, silent man fell across his legs with his face to the ground. Just then came a roll of drums from the corner of the square, the crowd surged back again and the band struck up with a boom and a crash. A confident voice roared. Walk march! Rank upon rank, gold-tasseled caps glittering, the 10th Cavalry Regiment moved off. Hash! Quite suddenly a grey patch between the domes of the cathedral broke open and the sun burst through the dull, overcast sky. The sun was bigger than anyone had ever seen it in the Ukraine and quite red, like pure blood. Streaks of clotted blood and plasma flowed steadily from that distant globe as it struggled to shine through the screen of clouds. The sun reddened the dome of St. Sophia with blood, casting a strange shadow from it onto the square, so that in that shadow Bogdan turned violet, and made the seething crowd of people look even blacker, even denser, even more confused. And grey men in long coats belted with rope and waving bayonets could be seen climbing up the steps leading up the side of the rock and trying to smash the inscription that stared down from the black granite plinth. But the bayonets broke or slithered uselessly away from the granite, and Bogdan wrenched his horse away from the rock at a gallop as he tried to fly away from the people who were clinging onto the hooves of his horse and weighing them down. His face, turned directly towards the red globe, was furious and he continued steadfastly to point his mace into the distance. At that moment a man was raised onto the slippery frozen basin of the fountain, above the rumbling, shifting crowd facing the statue of Bogdan. He was wearing a dark overcoat with a fur collar, and despite the frost he took off his fur hat and held it in his hands. The square still hummed and seethed like an ant-heap, but the belfry of St. Sophia had stopped ringing and the bands had marched off in various directions down the snowbound streets. An enormous crowd had collected around the base of the fountain. Pika, who's that up on the fountain? Looks like Petliura. Petliura's making a speech. Rubbish, that's just an ordinary speaker. Look, Marusha, the man's going to make a speech. Look, look. He's going to read a proclamation. No, he's going to read the universal.